Friday.
Thank you, Wallace.
Great to have you both on. Peter Fair, Victoria Stewart, thank you for your time. I'm Wallace Chapman, and thank you to Laura Dooney for putting the show together. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you Monday. Dr. Ella Hendry and Patrick Gower, Monday.
Whakarongo mai koe ke te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Heidi Akine, 40 years on, the daughter of Dame Whina Cooper, leads a land march of a different kind. More financial woes roll down the tracks for businesses near Auckland's K Road as the city rail construction drags on. A movie about the March 15 terror attacks blindsides some in the Muslim community. Has the shine gone off a glitzy $1 billion more development post-COVID? The investigation into the deaths of 3 precious kiwi at Wellington Zoo. A mongrel mob Waikato leader speaks out about this week's drug arrests. And the whopping rowing squad that is bound for the Tokyo Games. And we've also got the sweet find at Cadbury's old office block in Dunedin.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. A marcher at a hikoi of Far North Māori says they are continuing the work of activist and Dame Whina Cooper. Hundreds of people are opposing plans to classify 42% of land in the district as significant natural areas, a designation they say amounts to a land grab. One marcher, Murray, says the move shows little progress has been made since a 1975 land march Dame Whina led to Te Hapua, from Te Hapua to Parliament.
You look around today, the people are here. The government hasn't changed. Its ideals of stealing everything is the same. So once again, what Whina Cooper did, we have to do it again. They're not listening.
Yesterday, the Far North District Council agreed to pause the land use changes. A member of the Christchurch Muslim community says he's uncomfortable with a new movie about the 2019 mosque terror attacks, focusing on the role of the Prime Minister. Tony Green says he knew nothing of the movie until this morning and is concerned by the reported focus on Jacinda Ardern's actions.
Whilst you've got a community that is still in several degrees of anguish because human loss in such circumstances is a terrible thing. Incredible maiming, which is a lifelong painful thing. The praise for the Prime Minister is well deserved, but it can't gloss over the cost of that.
Tony Green says no one he has spoken to in the community today is happy with the planned film. The Ministry of Health says supplies of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine are tight and stocks will be carefully managed over the next 5 weeks. Director General Ashley Bloomfield says Pfizer confirmed earlier in the week that New Zealand will receive 1 million doses of the vaccine next month. He says there is enough to vaccinate 500,000 people until then. Dr Bloomfield says current bookings for vaccinations will not be affected, but people who walk into centres without an appointment will not be accommodated. DHBs will also contact people in Group 3, those aged over 65 or with disabilities or health conditions, and they will be invited to be vaccinated by the end of next month. A Christchurch woman with an immunocompromised husband says she feels left out in the dark about how to get a vaccine appointment. Anne Norris has been in contact with the National COVID-19 hotline and the Christchurch COVID vaccination number this week about getting her 72-year-old husband vaccinated.
It's kind of like you've got to know someone or be someone in order to be shoulder tapped for a vaccine. It's not enough just to be sick as a dog. Or immunocompromised, I should better describe my husband as.
And Norris says she just wants consistent information. The government may fork out more money for Auckland businesses struggling for customers thanks to delayed City Rail link works. Craig Wright, who owns Northern Line Bar and Social in Beresford Square, says his profits are down 50 to 60%. Mr Wright's pub is hidden from street view by large hoardings that will be in place for another 3 years.
The passageways change quite a lot, so as they're doing new works or as concrete's being delivered or rubble's being taken out, the access changes quite a lot. So sometimes I get the feeling that people walk towards and then it just goes in the too hard basket and, there's a lot of other options that they've got.
Craig Wright had to reduce hours and lay off staff to stay open. The Transport Minister Michael Wood has asked officials to see if a hardship scheme can be extended to businesses trading near CRL's yet to be completed Karangahape station. You can hear more on this story in Checkpoint shortly. The police say charges are still being considered for 2 people arrested after an armed offenders call out in Palmerston North this morning, which forced the lockdown of several schools. The police say they initially responded to reports of gunshots near Milson Line. The armed offender squad was called in after the suspects fled the scene and schools in the area were closed while a search was carried out. Petrol prices have hit $2.28 per litre, their highest since February last year. The Director of Oil and Gas Consultancy, Hale and Toomey, says prices have been slowly rising due to the post-COVID recovery demand and restrictions by the biggest oil-producing countries. But Steve West says it wouldn't take much for prices to steady if a bit more supply came in or there was another lockdown elsewhere in the world. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. 4 New Zealand sides are vying for the final berths in the last round of Trans-Tasman Super Rugby competition this weekend. The 4th-placed Hurricanes are first up against the Queensland Reds in Wellington tonight and must win. Then hope 2 of the other New Zealand sides lose in order to secure a place in the final. Later tonight, the 2nd-placed Highlanders play the Brumbies in Canberra. Highlanders coach Clark Dermody says securing a bonus point will be at the back of their minds.
There's always going to be that hanging around, but it's a matter of, we have to win first, mate. We have to go and try and do that first and then see how the game's situated in that last 20 minutes.
The Crusaders and top-of-the-table Blues play the winless Melbourne Rebels and Western Force respectively tomorrow. The Warriors have withdrawn from the NRL's women's competition, citing financial constraints. The Warriors have been involved in the NRLW since its inception in 2018, but the Chief Executive Cameron George says the impact of COVID-19 continues to be felt and they're wary of the border situation between New Zealand and Australia. The Black Caps are hoping to mop up the England tail early on day 2 of the second cricket test at Edgbaston. England will resume on 258 for 7. New Zealand will take its biggest ever rowing squad to an Olympics with a 32 rowers selected for Tokyo next month, with 9 crews in total. That's the news.
This Sunday morning, Tyler James, the singer who was Amy Winehouse's best friend. He lived with her through all her sad trials, but also the triumphs of her short life. He's finally written a book, which we'll talk to him about. Sam Schuller is calling home from one of the real enclaves of the world, the ski resort of Klosters in Switzerland. What hookworms might be able to do for your health? Men's health, we'll be talking about that too with Greg Murphy. And why young people in China are lying down in protest at their working lives. Sunday morning starts at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northern and western areas from Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Mostly cloudy, a period of sun tomorrow afternoon. The odd shower about the east coast of Northland, Coromandel Peninsula and Western Bay of Plenty, with areas of fog tomorrow morning. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mostly fine. Whanganui to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, mainly fine tonight. Areas of fog tomorrow morning. Mostly cloudy tomorrow with a fine break tomorrow afternoon. Canterbury, mostly cloudy, fine breaks tomorrow afternoon, areas of fog tomorrow morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy, a few showers tonight, drizzle developing tomorrow, turning to rain south of the glaciers tomorrow evening. For Otago and Southland, fine apart from morning and evening cloud, scattered rain tomorrow evening for the southern lakes. And Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy. RNZ National at 7.5 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, Susanna. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. More than 40 years after her mother's march to Parliament, the daughter of Dame Whina Cooper is leading calls to abandon the reclassification of huge amounts of land in Te Tai Tokerau. About 1,500 people marched on council offices in Kaikohe today, where staff have pushed pause on significant natural areas plans following massive backlash. While it's given some relief, marchers today demanded they be scrapped altogether. Te Aorewa Rolliston was there and filed this report.
Huge crowds marched to Kaikohe with iwi, hapu, whānau and farmers from across Te Tai Tokerau, joining in their opposition to planned land changes. Tamariki and Kaumātua led the hekoi and the call. Their message, crystal clear.
Stop SNA from taking our land. It was
tiring. Hey, This is amazing, kaupapa te tautoko.
Yeah, it is.
Love it.
Those gathered today are opposed to the reclassification of 42% of land in Northland as significant natural areas, or SNAs, due to their unique biodiversity. Yesterday, Far North District Council agreed to halt the SNA plans after a meeting with government ministers. The council's not going to make any final decisions until after the National Policy Statement on Biodiversity is finalised, which is expected to happen in July. But Te Poari o Ngāti Wai Chief Executive, Huhana Linden, wants to know what comes next.
We've heard from the council that they're calling a halt to the process, but what does that look like? So the challenge for council now is how are they going to honour the articles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and engage with us for real around what does the chiakitanga of our whenua look like moving forward. We don't oppose the fact that we all want to look after our land. It's the mechanism by which the Crown has sought to impose this regulation upon us without our consent.
While there was a huge turnout for the hikoi, she says there were some noticeable absences.
We know, that our MPs aren't here either, so that's a challenge for us around where are our MPs that represent us as constituents. We're going to continue on with pressure on council and on the government to come to the party, and let's look at a meaningful framework that can give effect to Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
Joining the protest and one of the loudest voices at the council offices was 84-year-old Whina Cooper Puru, the daughter of Dame Whina Cooper. It's been more than 40 years since Dame Whina Cooper's hikoi to Parliament with her cry, "Not one more acre." Hinirangi says today's march shows the fight has not changed and she wants the SNAs gone altogether.
The SNA must not be paused, it should be gone. Gone. We will do that. We will do it's our land, not theirs. For goodness sake, that is real treason to us.
She also noticed absences in today's crowd, with Far North Mayor John Carter away in Wellington after a meeting with ministers yesterday about the proposals.
I'm not happy that the Mayor himself has gone elsewhere. That finds that he's got no balls, and I have to be quite honest about that, when you don't face up, if you want to be the leader of this area of Taitokiro, face the people.
Far North Councillor Moko Tepania was there to welcome the crowd. He hopes the government will listen to their message.
What I expect to see from the National Policy Statement is a change in significant natural areas so that it doesn't come through. I think the government would be silly to do so. We're only one of the first districts who is actually going to be doing this, but it will be rolled out nationally. The West Coast region has spoken up loud and clear that they oppose this. The Northland region as a whole have said that today as well. So I don't want to see it in this form in the National Policy Statement.
And he vowed to do better in the future.
We can find a way with iwi and hapu at the table from the start to tell us how we need to do it rather than us telling them this is what we're going to be doing.
This is a kōrero these tamariki are keen to be a part of.
I really hope they listen because all these people have been trying a lot. So hard.
A lot of voices make big mana.
A movie is being planned about the March 15 terror attacks, but it's caught many in the Muslim community by surprise. The film, which has a working title of They Are Us, will star Australian actress Rose Byrne as Jacinda Ardern and will be directed by New Zealander Andrew Niccol. But some in the Muslim community feel blindsided and uneasy about it. Rachel Graham has more.
Andrew Niccol says the film will take place from Friday to Friday, from the prayer day when a gunman chose to murder Muslims to the following prayer day when New Zealand chose to honour them. In a statement, he says that instead of focusing on the attack, it focuses on the response to the attack.
The acts of heroism and sacrifice, acts of compassion, charity and courage that occurred during that remarkable of weeks when Jacinda Ardern set an example of leadership to the world, how you can be strong and kind and bring about real change.
The movie will be filmed in New Zealand, but the producers say they want to have a minimal impact on the city of Christchurch. Tony Green, a member of the Muslim community in Christchurch, says the first he knew of the movie was when people shared a link to an article about it on social media today. He's disappointed the focus appears to be on the Prime Minister and not on the wider loss.
Whilst you've got a community that is still in several degrees of anguish because human loss in such circumstances is a terrible thing, incredible maiming, which is a lifelong painful thing, the praise for the Prime Minister is well deserved, but it can't gloss over the cost of that, the price that had to be paid to get to that situation.
Spokesperson for the Islamic Women's Council, Anjan Rahman, shares those concerns and would prefer to see a story centred on the Muslim community.
The way the Prime Minister dealt with the incident is certainly part of that story to be told, but it shouldn't be centred. The community response was equally important in the way the Muslim community responded to the attacks.
Spokesperson for the Muslim Association of Canterbury, Abda Ghani Ali, says the attacks are still raw for the community. He says there are still many sensitivities around the tragic events of March 15th. The producers say they have consulted people in the Muslim community in Christchurch, but Mr Ali says he doesn't know who that was.
Well, as far as the Muslim Association of Canterbury, which is the organisation that runs Al Noor Mosque, which is one of the mosques that got attacked on March 15, we have not been contacted directly, and we have not been consulted or even contacted whatsoever. So I'm not sure who they claim to have spoken within the community, but as far as the Muslim Association of Canterbury, we have not received any contact.
The Imam of the Al Noor Mosque, one of the mosques targeted, Gamal Fuda, hopes any film made will be factual and positive.
So if it's going to focus on the peace and love and the connection and inclusion, so it's going to contribute to something positive, especially here in New Zealand. But if they are going to actually confuse people and send confusing messages, then I think it's going to be something that is not professional and is not accepted.
One of the producers of the film, Auckland-based Philippa Campbell, says they weren't.
And hopefully we'll be able to come back to that, or we'll post the item on our website. The Ministry of Health says stocks of the COVID-19 vaccine are tight, but there isn't a shortage. That's despite some saying they can't get appointments. The vaccination program is ahead of schedule so far, with some DHBs vaccinating 50% more people than planned. Joining me now is the Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. Kia ora, Dr. Bloomfield. Who has been told to slow down in terms of their delivery of COVID vaccinations?
Kia ora. Well, actually, what we've been doing over the last few days, now we've got that certainty of supply of the Pfizer vaccine through July, as well as the weekly consignments coming through to the end of June as well, as we've worked closely with DHBs just to make sure we're ensuring they all can deliver to plan, to 100% of their plan. We know that some of them have been delivering ahead of plan to date, and we just need to carefully manage the stock over this next 5 weeks.
So which ones have you told to slow down?
Look, I don't know the exact details, except I know there are some of our DHBs. 3 examples would be Nelson, Marlborough, we've had Northland, and I think Southern as well have been running ahead of plan. Overall, we're running at about 109% of plan, which is good. But what we're wanting to do is make sure over this next 5 weeks that all DHBs are able to deliver to the priority groups and to honour the appointments that people have already made.
So you're effectively asking them to ration at this point until you get your next big load?
No, I'm not. We're not asking them to ration, because over these next 5 weeks, every week we will be delivering more vaccinations than we have in any week to date. So we had always planned to ramp up. So it'll be somewhere around 100 to 110,000 vaccinations a week. And we will just be managing the supply carefully just to make sure that it is going to the people who have booked appointments and those who are in the priority groups.
But you are rationing, Dr. Bloomfield, because I appreciate what you just said there, but even in the press statement from the Ministry of Health, it says that you've changed plans and you were going to vaccinate some people in prison, other civilians and Defence Force personnel, and you're not vaccinating them when you intended. So that is effectively rationing, isn't it?
Well, rationing would be if we were holding back some of the vaccine and not giving it out. What we are doing is making sure that we use the vaccine that we've got to ensure the people who have had appointments and are in those priority groups. Particularly in Group 3, we're rolling out to that group we want those people to be receiving the vaccine because they are the priority.
If the DHBs continue to deliver vaccinations at the rates they are, when will we run out of Pfizer? Will it be before the next scheduled large instalment in July?
We are currently running at 108%, and so we're going to make sure that all the DHBs can deliver according to their plan, 100% of their plan. So effectively, we're just going to manage
But that's by asking them to slow down, Dr. Bloomfield. So I'm asking, if you didn't put the brakes on and tell them to prioritise groups and not vaccinate some people you had been scheduled to vaccinate, at what point do your projections tell you that you will run out of Pfizer?
Well, here's the point. We're not going to run out of Pfizer because, as we should be, responsibly, we are making sure that we are working with the DHBs to deliver according to their plans. And that's the important point here. It's great we have been running ahead of schedule, and now we're going to make sure that all DHBs are able to achieve what they're planning to achieve, 100% of their plans, over this next 5 weeks.
The Ministry of Health dashboard around vaccinations says you've got 189,000 doses left. Is that right?
Yes, that's what we had at that point in time in the freezers, but we continue to get weekly consignments.
Understand, but you've got 189,000 doses right now, and you've just put out a media statement that says you've got enough vaccinations to vaccinate 500,000 New Zealanders in the next 5 weeks. That's actually not correct, is it? Your projections, your hoped for delivery will give you enough to do that, but right now you don't. You have 189,000 vaccines.
Well, with all due respect, I think we're splitting hairs here. Of course, we have had and will continue to receive weekly consignments. So rightly, we are planning ahead to ensure that the system is able to deliver the vaccines we expect to receive over the next 5 weeks. And the good news here is actually more New Zealanders will be vaccinated in each of the next 5 weeks than in any of the weeks to date. So another 500,000 New Zealanders will be vaccinated, receive either their first or second dose over the coming 5 weeks.
So the New Zealand public has often been told that the speed of the vaccination rollout doesn't matter. It's when we finish that matters because we don't have COVID here. So actually, what is the problem with running the vaccine dry? Just go as quickly as you can, vaccinate as many people as you can, and then just wait for the next shipment. What's wrong with that as an approach?
Well, what we are doing is making sure we are calibrating the delivery against our supply. Because what we don't want to do, of course, is have teams stood up. There are over 100 sites around the country delivering now. We don't want them to vaccinate and then have to stand down. We also want to make sure we're honouring the appointments of the people who have already booked, and that's why we're making sure that every DHB can deliver according to their plan.
Ministry has said that Group 3, so this is people 65 plus, people with disabilities, health conditions, should get an invitation by the end of July at the very latest to come for their vaccination. Where's that invitation coming from? How will it arrive?
So the invitation will come from their District Health Board, or it may even be from their GP. And certainly from around the middle of July, we'll have our national booking system as well, and people will, in Group 3, and indeed once it's opened up to Group 4, will be able to go online and book as well, or ring through the National Health Line and book through that route.
So your national booking system is still not up and running?
It's actually been rolled out to DHBs between now and the end of June, and several DHBs are already online and using that as part of their vaccination invitation approach.
But it's not nationwide, which is obviously what the Auditor General was talking about. It's still not operational in a nationwide capacity at the moment.
Yeah, it's being rolled out to DHBs, and we've started with the DHBs that didn't already have an electronic booking system. A number of DHBs have, and that's the one they've been using to invite people to date around the country.
Okay, and you are confident that it will be fully operational by mid-July?
Yeah, very confident on that. The team's done an excellent job, and it's been rolled out to DHBs as we speak on a week-to-week basis. And that requires a lot of work. It has to be put in place in every one of those 100 sites. And through July, we'll be scaling up to somewhere between 800 and 1,000 sites through July and August around the country, and the booking system has to be in place in each of those sites.
While we've been talking, Dr. Bloomfield, we've had a text in from someone, and this is in relation to a 92-year-old living in a New Plymouth retirement home, saying that none of the residents have had their COVID vaccinations and have not been notified of them. Have all our rest homes, which are in a higher priority group, I think they were in 2, weren't they? Do you know if they've all had their vaccinations, or how far through are you?
They haven't all had their vaccinations. I can say in some DHBs they have completed vaccinating in their aged residential care facilities. Others are still working through them, but what we have asked is that by the end of June, in every DHB region, all residents have had at least their first dose, and the latest reports are our DHBs are on target for that.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is the Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield there. It is almost 24 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Still to come on the program, has the shine gone off a glitzy $1 billion mall development in Auckland? And also, Homai Ufakaro, want to know your thoughts on the rollout of the vaccination scheme. As discussed there, the Ministry of Health has put out a statement saying they've got enough vaccine supply to vaccinate 500,000 New Zealanders in the next 5 weeks, but as Dr. Bloomfield acknowledged, there's 189,000 doses in the fridge at the moment. Are you in one of those priority groups, and are you still waiting for your jab? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. They've survived K Road's infamous roadworks and 4 COVID-19 lockdowns, but there's another big problem coming down the tracks for a cluster of bars and eateries off Auckland's Pitt Street. Huge barriers have turned the central city street into a noisy, narrow lane, shielding owners from the people who pay their bills. And with CRL works delayed by COVID-19, the government may be forced to extend a business hardship program that's already paid out hundreds of thousands of dollars. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
I'm not going to close and run. I can't.
Craig Wright has poured everything he has into his little pub on the corner of Beresford Square and Pitt Street. But right now, Northern Line Pub and Social is, well, anything but social. Wright is fighting for his future, trying to turn over a profit behind the giant walls that have turned his street front freehouse into more of a back alley bar.
Confidence-wise, I'm not confident, but I've got to keep going. I've invested everything into this. You know, I'm a small independent businessman. It's just me. There's no deep pockets anywhere, so we just keep going.
Roadworks and cycleways on K Road have been completed, and COVID-19 lockdowns in Auckland are a thing of the past. But these businesses on Pitt Street face a new fight for survival, trading behind these massive walls for years to come. That's because this is now a hot zone for City Rail Link development. For Craig Wright, these massive walls mean a massive drop in business. Checkpoint visits just before 5 p.m. Northern Line should be full. Instead, a single lonely punter slurps back a pint as he enjoys the serenity. So the man from Manchester is scrambling. Hours have been cut back, erasing his daytime business, and that's not to mention the staff cuts.
We're probably down about 50 to 60%. Obviously, COVID has had a massive effect on that as well, in the confidence side of people being in the city. But really, the fact that we are pretty invisible to passing trade, it is quite difficult to actually get to us.
It's true to say the $4.4 billion City Rail Link was well in the works when Mr. Wright started pouring porters, pale ales and pilsners here back in 2018. And he had accounted for the interruption, but then a thing called COVID came along.
I can't blame, the Link Alliance for COVID. We had to deal with that, and that became what was, if you like, our little bit of slush fund that we had to deal with this went during that. We've by their schedule, we've got less to go than we've already done. So we're really trying. I even just said today, if I had $1 for every time somebody says you've got to wear it out, I wouldn't need to wear it out. I could retire. So.
Around the corner, the iconic Pitt Street pub on the corner of K Road and Pitt sits empty, bar a few people playing the pokies. Manager Satbir Singh says this is normal. K Road's just completed cycleways have buggered the business.
Again, COVID didn't help at all. And then on top of that, the construction. So the foot traffic is very low. There's no tourists in CBD.
Things are on the improve. Finally, K Road is rid of roadworks. The cycleways are done and there's still some parking. But Mr Singh has grave fears for Craig Wright and the rest of his neighbours.
Not too much for us, but the cafe down the lane and other businesses which are on this alley where people can't just walk in, yeah, there is a problem.
The scene is cheerier on K Road on Friday morning as politicians, cyclists and mana whenua gather to celebrate the completion of the Karangahape Road Enhancements Project. But the truth is, things remain grim for some here, so we asked Transport Minister Michael Wood what he's doing to help them out. He assures us he's working on it. City Rail Link Limited has already received hardship claims totalling over $617,000 to a particularly vocal bunch of businesses on Albert Street.
So I have asked officials to review that to determine if that might be an appropriate way of providing some support for other businesses who are impacted.
But at least for some on K Road, the nightmare is over.
Free! We're free of the gates and the roadworks and the cones, and people can park again, and K Road's hopefully coming back to life.
Danielle Butler owns and operates the Pie Piper. The waft of freshly baked donuts is usually more than enough to draw hordes of customers, but years of roadworks on K Road have kept them away.
Coming in to pick up a cake or a pie was impossible because there was no parking. And so, those customers, of course, that they were frustrated, so they'd go somewhere else.
But it's a reality that remains back at Craig Wright's Northern Line. There was a glimmer of hope. CRL had promised walkthroughs between the 3-metre barricades towards his pub, but he's since been informed that won't be happening.
Whether that will still happen once they're finished here, I don't know, but they were supposed to have happened and are not happening.
As for the Great Wall, it'll be here until 2024.
And a City Rail Link Limited spokesman says access across Beresford Square is no longer viable due to safety concerns on the constrained site. He says CRL has worked with businesses by pulling the hoardings back to create space for outdoor dining areas. Kia ora e te iwi e haere ake nei e our checkpoint. The mongrel mob chapter that denounces drugs explains why 3 of its members are facing drug charges. A murderer who shot and dismembered his victim gets at least 15 years behind bars, and the largest New Zealand rowing squad ever is heading to the Tokyo Games. Ho mai o whakaaro, would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know your thoughts on the vaccine rollout and also on plans to make the movie centred around the March 15 killings. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now with Susana.
A marcher at a hikoi of Far North Māori says they are continuing the work of activist and queer Dame Whina Cooper. Hundreds of people are opposing plans to classify 42% of land in the district as significant natural areas, a designation they say amounts to a land grab. One marcher says the move shows little progress has been made since 1975, when Dame Whina led a hikoi from Te Hāpua to Parliament. Yesterday, the Far North District Council agreed to pause the changes. The Ministry of Health says supplies of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine are tight and stocks will be carefully managed over the next 5 weeks. The Director-General, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, says Pfizer confirmed this week that New Zealand will receive 1 million doses of the vaccine next month. He says there is enough to vaccinate 500,000 people until then, and current bookings for vaccinations will not be affected. The government may fork out more money for Auckland businesses struggling for customers thanks to delayed City Rail link works. The Transport Minister has asked officials to see if a hardship scheme can be extended to businesses trading near CRL's yet-to-be-completed Karangahape station. Craig Wright, who owns Northern Line Bar and Social in Beresford Square, says his profits are down 50 to 60% because of the works, and he has had to lay off staff to stay open. Petrol prices have hit $2.28 per litre, the highest in more than a year. An oil consultant, Steve West, says it's a result of crude oil prices rising due to the post-COVID recovery demand and restrictions by the OPEC oil-producing countries. Canterbury's Mount Hutt has opened its slopes for the season after a sprinkling of snow courtesy of last week's wild weather. It's the first South Island commercial field to open. A multi-million-dollar 8-person chairlift that can carry up to 3,000 people an hour is also making its debut. A local accommodation operator says the rooms are fully booked this weekend. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Kia ora rā, iho. No mai hoki mai. You're listening to Checkpoint. It's time for the business news now, and you might have heard Nicholas humming the Checkpoint theme song in the background there. Very cheery for a Friday, Nicholas. Okay, let's start with Sky City. You say, well, something tells us it's on the path to recovery. What's the evidence?
Recovery, signs of recovery.
Yeah.
This really is a firm that has been affected by the pandemic. Those closed borders have meant fewer international visitors staying at its hotels, but also gambling in their casinos, and as a result of that uncertainty about what the future may hold, this company has been reluctant to notify the market, to notify investors about what its full year profit may look like until today. It says it expects its normalised profit to be between $84 and $88 million, which is about a 30% increase on last year's result, which was badly ravaged by the effects of the pandemic. And the reason why this firm is feeling somewhat more optimistic and empowered to tell the market about how it expects to do when the year ends in June was that its recent trading has really bet its expectations. They say business in New Zealand has been doing very well, particularly when it comes to its strong earnings from its gambling machines. So it seems lots more and more people are going to the pokies. But they've also seen steady earnings from its redeveloped casino and hotel in Adelaide, and also a strong performance from its online casino. And while this is encouraging, it is worth noting that the company, its profit that it's forecast for the year ending June is still about half of what it managed to turn around in pre-COVID in 2019. So there is, to some degree, some way to travel. And its results will be released in August. I'm a little bit excited about it because it will be the first time the company will hopefully speak to us. We've had numerous requests to speak to this company this year, and one of the questions that we do want to talk to them about is the details around this probe that the Australian regulator has launched around anti-money laundering compliance.
In respect of the Adelaide operation, isn't it?
Yes, it's around anti-money laundering compliance. That was an investigation that was announced at the beginning of the week. They say they're going to be fully cooperative, and they believe in having the highest standards when it comes to trying enforcing anti-money laundering. So, look, we look forward to hearing more details about that in the future. As a result of this announcement, its share price was up 1.4%, or about 5 cents to $3.60 per share.
Okay, we've all seen the pictures from the massive Canterbury floods recently. Tower Insurance is telling us how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, this is one of the benefits of having a publicly listed insurer on the market, is when you do have a significant natural disaster like this, it's going to have to tell investors how much it's going to cost. And they say, the company says it's received 164 claims from people in the Canterbury region, and the total value of the damage is between $2.8 and $3 million. And the company says it's been quite busy in recent weeks. It's been fielding calls, processing claims, but also offering support and advice to those people who've been affected by those floods. But the cost of this payout will affect its earnings. In its announcement today, it's had to lower its full year profit guidance from about $26 million to $23 million. And that's actually the second downgrade this company has reported this year, because of what it's noted has been, a number of severe weather events in the past 12 months. One that comes to mind that's maybe slipped our mind has been those Napier floods last year. And interestingly, as a result of these higher claims, the company announced last month in its half-year results that it was going to undertake a review where they're going to use data science to see how it can come up with changes to how it values policies for houses. I found that incredibly intriguing. I'm interested
And
to
what
see
it means for premiums.
Well, exactly, yes. So I think that we can maybe expect what may happen there, but I'm interested to see how they're using technology to actually determine this and calculate how much they charge people. So that's going to be quite interesting. Look forward to speaking to them when they do decide to release the findings of that report, that review. So its share price actually rose slightly following this news, up 0.7%, which is something like 0.005 cents to 73 cents a share.
Okay, shall we take a trot around the rest of the market?
Yeah, the NZX is up 32 points to 12,550. The dollar is at 71.9 US cents and 92.8 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with Business. A year on from opening, some retailers at Auckland's Commercial Bay shopping centre say they're struggling to stay afloat. The $1 billion development with more than 120 shops opened just as COVID-19 restrictions first eased last year. Management's painting a rosy picture after a slight increase in foot traffic thanks to the Trans-Tasman bubble, but they also cut back opening hours. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Samuel Rilstone filed this report.
Sweet treats, drinks and specials on offer for customers today to celebrate Commercial Bay's first birthday. The downtown mall was designed for a time when 2.7 million tourists visited the city, many off cruise ships. But CEO Scott Pritchard is still pleased with where they're tracking.
After 1 year, as it stands today, we've had about 9 million. In the last 6 to 7 weeks, we've seen a really strong boost in people returning back to the city. So that's coincided with the America's Cup. I think there's a lot of works around the city that have been completed. The Aussie bubble's helped a lot. There's no doubt about that. In fact, I've been talking to a couple of retailers, one in particular, who said that one entire day was filled with Australian visitors, and that's fantastic. That's what we want.
Kokako Coffee was bustling this morning as CBD workers lined up for their morning fix. Manager Shannon Hafner was handing out a treat to mark the day. She says for now things are pretty steady with the regulars.
So we've got some cake from the caker, obviously the best of the best, and yeah, just handing that out to all of our regulars. It's been interesting to say the least. We are in a place now where we're quite happy with how everything's going. Obviously still looking forward to international tourists and all of that, showcasing the brand, showcasing what New Zealand has to offer. We've got it pretty good here with the amount of people in town, and as I said, we've got a good offering.
But not everyone can rely on regulars and short-lived berths like the America's Cup to keep them going. When Commercial Bay first opened its doors, around 500,000 people visited in its first week. While the bubble with Australia has boosted things slightly, numbers are still dwindling, sitting at around 210,000 per week, and businesses have no guarantee it'll last. And shoppers can no longer hit the mall late on Thursday and Friday. Only the restaurants and bars are open past 7 p.m. Ting Zhou is the assistant manager at designer clothing store Sanjo. Without international customers, he says there isn't a market for them.
And I noticed like from the first lockdown finish, the shopping mall was very busy, a lot of customers. But after second lockdown finish, we can see the foot traffic like slowly slow down now. And before we do have a late night, but now the whole shopping mall decided to cancel the late night because we don't have enough customers.
After the end of the workday, he says the mall's main customers, office workers, are gone.
After 6 o'clock, like we have no customers, so it's no point for us to keep going, to open the shop. I think the whole store agreed with that, like don't open late night, yes.
OG Sushi relies on them to grab their lunch.
We're always super slammed during lunch times. Everyone's coming for their lunch breaks and everything, so yeah, that'll be our main clientele, yeah.
Manager Rochelle says they've struggled to keep staff during such uncertain times, and some people are hesitant of work in hospitality in fear of COVID rearing its head again.
We are kind of looking for new staff, and it has been a bit of a struggle recently though, definitely. There's not many people around. There's just not many people looking for hospitality work anymore, so yeah, I don't know if that's due to the COVID or what happened. So it's scarce.
Bomi Kim's a chef at the Paella Pod. She's still hurting from COVID-19.
It was so hard to just stand here to waiting customers. Even like cook everything, and everything was like wasted, so that was kind of hard, but yeah.
Things are still extremely quiet, and she's desperate for something to change.
Kind of okay, but I wish we could be much busier. If we can get tourists, might be get more busier. It's so bad when I just quiet when they're doing nothing, trying to do something, but still it's not with the customer, so that's a hard time.
Commercial Bay's retail manager Andrew Trounsden is adamant they're doing all they can to support businesses, offering financial support on a case-by-case basis and ramping up advertising.
We've invested heavily in marketing across the precinct to drive visitors into the centre. We've also really focused on delivering kind of premium services. So we worked with Downtown Car Park with Auckland Transport and have launched a valet car parking service, which has really been tracking up phenomenally lately, and it's driving. We've got an offer that, if you spend $50 in the centre, you get 2 hours free valet parking, and the retailers are capitalising on that, and it's driving a heap of people into the centre.
That's despite multiple shops having to close their doors, including luggage company Herschel Co., designer clothing store Ingrid Stans, and coffee and smoothie shop Cali Press. That's gone into liquidation.
Wellington commuters may have to pay for the privilege of driving to work in future, with the City's Council plans to accelerate congestion charges as soon as it gets the green light from the government. Parliament's Transport and Infrastructure Committee is currently exploring the possibility of a congestion charge for Auckland, but Wellington City Council has signalled its intention to put a plan up for public consultation within months. Finlay Dunseith reports.
So-called congestion charges, intended to reduce peak hour traffic, have only been introduced in 8 cities around the world. Now they're polarising the capital's residents and businesses. The Road Transport Forum is right behind the idea, which it hopes will free up the roads for freight. Chief Executive Nick Leggett says reducing the number of cars on the road will boost productivity.
It isn't some amazing solution. It's one of the many things that we need to do to improve people's use of public transport, get them out of their vehicles, reduce congestion on the highways so critical freight can move, but so we've got a much better transport system that allows Wellingtonians to move around, get on with their days, and also improve productivity in the region.
But the Automobile Association doesn't believe there's enough evidence to support congestion charges. Senior Infrastructure Advisor Sarah Geard says the council will struggle to get the public's backing without more preparation.
It takes many, many years to work through how these systems could work and to build public support, because ultimately without public support these things can't be taken forward. Proposals need to be based on really good analysis so the public can understand the benefits that the charges would deliver relative to the costs that people would incur.
On the streets of Wellington, some people simply put the proposed congestion rates down to poor governance.
Absolutely ludicrous. The cities they're comparing with overseas probably have decent public transport systems in place, and the government probably support those public transport systems. This city doesn't. They can't cope with the bus services now and the people they've got. It will fail dramatically.
I'd say it's just another example of massively incompetent local and national government, as opposed to getting the money that they already have and using it wisely.
However, others see it as a necessary step to getting traffic out of the CBD.
If we want to get vehicles out of the CBD, we need to get people in, and the public transport at the moment doesn't really cut it, so we've got to do something.
Wellington Mayor Andy Foster is pleased to see the government moving on congestion pricing and hopes it may get the traffic moving in more ways than one. He says the council would welcome a ring-fenced alternative funding source to help pay for Let's Get Wellington Moving, the massive $6.4 billion transport plan for the region. Councils are on the hook for 40% of the cost.
It is 14 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki in a pita kōrero after the news at 6. The mongrel mob chapter that says it's against drugs distances itself from 3 of its own facing drugs charges. The mother of a man shot in the head 3 times has told his killer her world's fallen apart since her son's death. Jay Lingman has been sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 15 years for murdering Denver Chance at his rural property south of Auckland 2 years ago. Chen Liu was in the High Court at Auckland and filed this story, and just a warning, parts of this report may be distressing for some listeners.
After Denver Chance was reported missing in February 2019, his mother, Paula McGregor, told the court his family and friends searched tirelessly for him. But Jay Lehman had shot her son, dragged his body down to the carport, and used the chainsaw to fit it into a chest freezer. It was found 2 weeks later, and Ms. Gregor said her world fell apart.
I can't even begin to think in any detail about what happened to Denver's body after he was killed. The degradation and disrespect is staggering and extremely hard to comprehend. Because of what was done to Denver's body, I could not even hold his hand or physically touch him to say goodbye.
Since her son's murder, she's struggled to come to terms with what happened.
I have tried all sorts of ways to try and get some peace back into my life. I know that I have to try and live with what happened, but finding any true joy is now almost impossible.
Denver Chance's sister, Virginia O'Sullivan, who lives in the United States, provided a recorded victim impact statement to the court. She described her brother as a gentle teddy bear.
My heart feels like it's being pulled out of my chest as I read this. It's so difficult to put into words how much someone means to you when you know they're not here anymore.
Since her brother's death, she has had to give up her job.
I'm not the same person I was. I have lost the coping mechanism to handle stress. I had to leave my job, my chef job, working on super yachts that I loved for the last 12 years, all because the stress was no longer something my body and mind could cope with.
During the trial, Jay Lehman argued he was acting in self-defense when he shot Denver Chance in the head. The jury didn't accept that. Both men were drug dealers, and Justice Harland said Mr. Chance's family had no idea of his involvement in the drug world.
The world of drug dealing is an insidious and dangerous world, and it is a tragedy that any of you have become involved in what has transpired here.
Justice Harland said what Jay Lehman did to Denver Chance's body has had a profound impact on his family and friends.
It has caused them considerable trauma, making it profoundly more difficult for them to come to terms with what has happened to the person they loved.
On the first day of the trial, Jay Lehman pleaded guilty to 3 drug possession charges. Justice Harland sentenced him to 1 year in prison for those offences, to be served concurrently.
New Zealand will take its biggest ever rowing squad to the upcoming Olympics with 32 rowers selected for Tokyo. All up there will be 9 crews, including 10 world champion female rowers. Our reporter Kate Gregan caught up with them at Lake Karapiro.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 2020 New Zealand Olympic rowing team, we wish them all the best.
Aotearoa's largest ever Olympic rowing squad has finally been named. Next month, Kerry Gowler and Grace Prendergast will get 2 shots at gold after being named as both the women's pair and in the women's 8 squad. This will be the pair's second appearance at the Games, having competed at Rio in 2016. Grace says she's incredibly proud to be named for Tokyo, considering they weren't sure whether the Games were even going to go ahead.
Obviously, it's been a journey like no other to this one, so I think it makes it even more special, and just this kind of signifies that we're on our way, like it's happening, we're going to go and we're going to race, which means so much more now that there was a chance that this might never have happened. So yeah, we're thrilled.
And says despite not having raced internationally for 2 years, they're ready.
Obviously, we haven't been able to have any markers against other countries, which is quite unusual, but I think that just makes us more determined to sort of like tick all our boxes, because as we say, we're not going to have a test. Like our next time we race is going to be in the Olympics.
10 rowers have been selected to the 8, with the final makeup of the boat yet to be decided. In the women's double scull, Brooke Donoghue will compete with Hannah Osborne. Brooke is a 2-time world champion and will make her Olympic debut in Tokyo.
I'm really excited. It has been a long time coming, especially with this extra 1 year delay, but no, I'm really excited that we're here and that it's finally happening.
Brooke Donoghue won the 2017 and 2019 world champs with Liv Lowe, who will be competing in Japan in the women's quad. It was a last-minute boat change for Liv, who competed with Hannah Osborne for a spot in the double-scull boat. A change, Liv says, has made for a really hard week.
Obviously, changing paths this close is tough, but my new team has really rallied around me. They've been incredibly welcoming. It's been also incredibly humbling, the amount of support I've had from the wider team and from people all over the country and the world. So I feel very lucky to have so many people that care.
Nevertheless, Liv Lowe says she's thrilled to be taking on Tokyo with her new team, who she says is showing a lot of promise. Jordan Parry will also make his Olympic debut as New Zealand's men's singles sculler, having edged out two-time Olympic champion Mahi Drysdale for the spot.
There is this element of big shoes to fill, but I think I'd just like to look at it like I'm just going to take those shoes, resize them for me, and build confidence as I go.
Attending his fourth Olympic Games is rowing legend Hamish Bond. He won back-to-back golds in the men's pair at the 2012 and 2016 Games alongside Eric Murray, but says preparing for Tokyo has been a very different experience. And he is very aware of recent polls showing as many as 80% of the Japanese population do not want the Games to go ahead.
Yeah, like it does seem wrong, I suppose, in some ways, to be feeling as though we're imposing ourselves on them when polls say, whether they're to be believed, whether they're media driven, that the public don't want us to be there. But so I guess for us as individuals, we're such a small cog, it's not up to us to make those decisions.
But the rowing legend says New Zealand will do everything they can to ensure everyone's safety.
I think we'll be very respectful of each other, the other competitors, and certainly the host nation as well, and doing all that we can to not impact the Japanese public negatively in any way.
The naming of the rowing squad takes the total number of athletes selected to the New Zealand team to 117.
A sweet trove of documents has been unearthed during the demolition of the old Cadbury office block that will be the site of the new Dunedin Hospital. The old books are full of details about Hudson & Co., the local family business that made yummy biscuits and chockies and went on to merge with the global company Cadbury. This is what dreams are made of for archaeologist Megan Lawrence, who might have just done a little dance when they were discovered.
So we've come across about 16 books that are all minute books from the directors from the R. Hudson Company, starting from about 1899 right through into the Cadbury Hudson Fry Company history, and they continue on right till about 1988. So we've got quite almost 100 years of history in these 16 books.
I doubt you've had the opportunity to read every last line, but can you give us a bit of an insight into what kind of stuff has been recorded? What can you learn about the company from these ledgers?
Absolutely. So there's lots of facts and figures and lots of numbers, which unfortunately haven't had too much time to go into detail, but there's some really key events that are noted down into these books. So the incorporation of the R. Hudson Company in 1899 is in the first page, the first thing that's in the books. But as we go through the history, it's got some great fascinating detail about improvements to the factories and improvements to other buildings such as cottages on there. It goes through both the war year periods, so there's notes in there about how raw materials were becoming very expensive during the First World War, but
do they say what?
Pretty well.
Do they say what, Megan?
Not in particular, no. They just mentioned that each record is quite brief in itself, so there's not too much detail, but we still extract little bits of information from it.
And are they handwritten or?
Yes, especially in the first book that we have, which is actually covers quite a number of years from 1899 to 1950. That book starts off in cursive writing, and then at the very end of the book we start hitting some typed records there as well.
I understand there's a mention of like a first car.
Yes. There is indeed. So a motor wagon is noted down in November 1912, and it was expected in the following April. However, immediately below that record, they're also still talking about stables and new stables on the property as well. So still making use of horses.
Maybe they didn't think the whole petrol car thing was going to take off.
Exactly.
Any biscuit or secret chocolate recipes or anything like that squirreled away inside these ledgers?
No, unfortunately not. I don't think the directors were the ones making each of the recipes that were coming out of there, but we had some cool finds with plans that we also came across that had plans of the curly-whirly machine and chocolate fish moulds, which was quite exciting. And, you know, when you walk around the buildings, occasionally you come across the odd Jaffa or Easter egg that have been left behind.
Seriously?
Yes, seriously, yeah.
Edible or not, do we think?
I think that depends on the person, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, what's your rule for the floor? 2 seconds or, you know...
2 years, 5 years, yeah. Again, I think it depends on the wrapping condition. Yeah.
Exactly. So you actually found the plans for the curly-whirly machine. This is the wonky chocolate bar, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So we found quite a few plans. It's kept in some architectural drawers there, and they've all been digitally scanned, so we have preserved them for the future, really, and make that accessible to people.
Yeah, so in terms of the books, what happens to them now?
So we'll start talking to local museums and archives. In particular, we'll talk to Hocken and the local museum Toitu here and look to find the appropriate home for them so that hopefully they'll be accessible to the public to see and view, but also to make them available for future research, because there's some really great information in there, and I'd say a few people could write a master's or a PhD thesis out of the information that's in those books.
So, Megan, is this the kind of stuff that makes an archaeologist skip when they find something like this?
Absolutely. Made my day. Made the officers' day when we brought them back, and these are great finds. We're very excited.
And that is archaeologist Megan Lawrence. Wow, we've got a bunch of feedback from you. This is about the vaccination rollout in our earlier interview with the DG of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. Let's start with this page. 91-year-old mother in Christchurch rest home still hasn't had her first jab, so no way those residents are going to have 2 jabs by the end of June. Over 65s in Canterbury, this person says, certainly aren't getting jabbed. The information on the DHB's website has gone from Group 3, getting the vaccine in May, to June and July, and now to no date. However, they do say for over 65s not to worry, everyone will be vaccinated by the end of the year. The whole rollout is a shambles and very disappointing, that listener says. Dad is 87, another person says, with a heart condition. He has not had an appointment. People younger than him have had a vaccination. Someone else has got into touch to say thinks that Ashley Bloomfield's, let's put it politely, telling porkies, and says, I couldn't get an appointment in Northland for 6 weeks despite saying they will vaccinate all over 65s now.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with DNA. The Director General of Health says COVID-19 vaccinations will be carefully managed over the next 5 weeks, but insists the program is still ahead of schedule. 1 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine are due to arrive next month, but until then, vaccinations will be tightly controlled. Ashley Bloomfield told Checkpoint while supplies will not run out in the coming weeks, the delivery of the vaccine will be weighed against the supply.
What we don't want to do, of course, is have teams stood up. There are over 100 sites around the country delivering now. We don't want them to vaccinate and then have to stand down. We also want to make sure we're honouring the appointments of the people who have already booked, and that's why we're making sure that every DHB can deliver according to their plan.
Dr Bloomfield says there is enough to vaccinate 500,000 people until new supplies arrive. The Muslim Association of Canterbury says it knew nothing of a proposed movie about the terror attacks on Christchurch mosques until today. The producers say they have consulted people in the Muslim community in Christchurch, but the association's spokesperson, Abdijani Ali, says he doesn't know who that was.
We have not been contacted directly. And we have not been consulted or even contacted whatsoever. So I'm not sure who they claim to have spoken within the community, but as far as the Muslim Association of Canterbury, we have not received any contact.
Abdigani Ali says the attacks are still raw for the community. Marchers at a hikoi of Far North Māori say they're outraged at proposed changes to land use rules. The hikoi was in protest at plans to classify 42% of land in the district as significant natural areas. One angered marcher, Murray, says he took part to stop land theft. He says he wants the government to listen and work with landowners. Yesterday, the Far North District Council agreed to pause the land use changes. A mongrel mob Waikato leader says the chapter's anti-drugs stance remains, despite 3 members being caught up in raids targeting suspected dealers. An international FBI-led operation has led to hundreds of arrests through an encrypted messaging app that was actually created and monitored by police. Paula Ormsby, who is in charge of the group's first women's chapter, told Checkpoint gang leaders can't track members' activities at all times.
You know, to be really honest, I couldn't care less what anybody else thinks, because we are making changes within the mongrel mob. There has been a shift in paradigm.
Paula Ormsby says the mongrel mob kingdom has low incarceration, suicide and family violence rates compared to other chapters because of its social work with members. You can hear more of this interview in Checkpoint coming up. The sister of a man shot in the head before his body was stuffed in a chest freezer says she couldn't cope with the stress of losing her beloved brother. In the High Court at Auckland this morning, Jay Lingman was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 15 years and 2 months for murdering Denver Chance. Both men were drug dealers who fell out over a stash of drugs. Mr. Chance's sister Virginia O'Sullivan, who lives in Tennessee, recorded a victim impact statement.
My heart feels like it's being pulled out of my chest as I read this. It's so difficult to put into words how much someone means to you when you know they're not here anymore. Not having Denver has changed my life and many others around me in such a significant way.
Jay Lingman has also been sentenced to 1 year in prison on drug-related charges to be served concurrently. The police have yet to lay charges against 2 people arrested over a firearms incident in Palmerston North. Several schools were put into lockdown after reports of gunshots on Milson Line, north of the city, this morning. Ruth Hill reports.
The suspects fled after the gunshots were heard just after 11 o'clock this morning. The Armed Defenders Squad was called in, and several schools in the immediate area were closed while police investigated whether other offenders were involved. A police spokesperson says charges are still being considered for the 2 people arrested. They say no one was injured.
Documents dating back 120 years have been unearthed from a former Cadbury office block marked for demolition. The 16 books hold business records of Dunedin business Hudson & Co., a biscuit and chocolate company that later merged with Cadbury. Its first entry is dated February 1899, when chocolate was delivered in horse-drawn carriages. The building will be demolished to make way for the new Dunedin Hospital. Principal archaeologist at New Zealand Heritage Properties, Megan Lawrence, says the historic books will likely be stored in a museum or collection. She says some tastier discoveries have also been made, including plans for the Curly Whirly machine and the chocolate fish mould. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. The Warriors have withdrawn from this year's NRL's women's competition, citing financial constraints. The Warriors have been involved in the NRLW since its inception in 2018. The club's chief executive, Cameron George, says the volatility of the Trans-Tasman travel bubble also factored in the decision.
We're not dealing with professional sports people. They still retain jobs. So there's going to be a huge amount of risk and pressure and stress put on everyone if there was a border shut and the players got locked out of New Zealand or locked into New Zealand, vice versa for Australian teams.
Cameron George is confident the Warriors will rejoin the expanded women's competition next season. Former All Blacks midfielder Malakai Fekitoa is switching his international rugby allegiance to Tonga. The 29-year-old, who's currently playing for English club Wasps, played 24 tests for the All Blacks between 2014 and 2017 and will play for Tonga at next weekend's final Olympic Sevens qualifying tournament in Monaco. However, Fekitoa won't play for Tonga against the All Blacks in Auckland next month. The Wellington Phoenix have confirmed All Whites goalkeeper Stefan Marinovic has left the club. He's reportedly signed with an Israeli club. New Zealand golfer Danny Lee has made a strong start to the latest PGA Tour event in South Carolina. He's tied for 7th, 3 shots off the lead. Lee is chasing his first top 10 finish for the season to climb the PGA Tour rankings and retain his tour card. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Rhea Hall selects the mixtape. Country Life takes in the latest science on self-shearing sheep. They shed their wool without any help from us. Question is, who picks up the dags? And because King George VI first tried a hot dog on this day in 1939, we've got a Sonic Tonic dedicated to fast food on Nights, supersizing your evening with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7. on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight. Tomorrow, northern and western areas from Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Mostly cloudy, a period of sun tomorrow afternoon. The odd shower about the east coast of Northland, Coromandel Peninsula and western Bay of Plenty, with areas of fog tomorrow morning. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, mostly fine. Whanganui to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, mainly fine tonight, areas of fog tomorrow morning. Mostly cloudy tomorrow. There will be a fine break tomorrow afternoon. For Canterbury, mostly cloudy, fine breaks tomorrow afternoon, areas of fog in the morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy. A few showers tonight, drizzle developing tomorrow, turning to rain south of the glaciers tomorrow evening. Otago and Southland, fine apart from morning and evening clouds, scattered rain tomorrow night for Southern Lakes. And Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen toku ingoa. A Christchurch woman says she feels left in the dark after trying to arrange a vaccine for her immunocompromised husband. The vaccine rollout for people who are at risk of getting very sick from COVID-19 started in May, but some are struggling to access the vaccine. That's raising concerns the number of Pfizer vaccines is drying up quickly before the next deliveries are due. Tess Brunton reports.
Christchurch resident Anne Norris has been on a mission to get her 72-year-old husband David vaccinated. His GP told him if he catches COVID, he will die.
He's immunocompromised as a cancer survivor. His last chemo as a side effect that came in a year or more after the chemo is that it's caused heart failure. The hospitalisation in March, weren't really sure what was going on, but after 10 days they determined that he was now in kidney failure.
He falls into Group 3 of the government's rollout that got underway last month, but Anne Norris says she feels stonewalled when she's tried to arrange a vaccine appointment for him. In the last week, she's called the National COVID-19 hotline and the Christchurch COVID vaccination number to no avail. Mr. Norris visited his GP on Tuesday with hopes to find out what he needed to do to get one.
And the GP just threw his hands up and said, nothing to do with us. We're never going to be able to give them to you, nor is the pharmacy next door that provides flu vaccination services and has done for yonks. It's nothing to do with us. Do not ask again. So when I asked David about it, he just didn't have the answer to the questions, like why not? Why couldn't he?
The Canterbury DHB COVID-19 Response Executive Lead, Ralph LaSalle, says the DHB is sorry to hear this woman's experience and understands her concern for her husband. He says it will take months to vaccinate Group 3 in Canterbury, as there are more than 170,000 eligible people. Mr. LaSalle says they're working in stages and contacting people directly about how to book by text, email, letter or phone call, and ask for people to be patient while they wait. He says the DHB recently ran ads in all local papers about this and has a dedicated vaccination website. But Anne Norris says this isn't what she was told by either COVID hotline or his GP, and she was even suggested to book an appointment in a different region.
It's kind of like you've got to know someone or be someone in order to be shoulder tapped for a vaccine. It's not enough just to be sick as a dog. Or immunocompromised, I should better describe my husband as.
Royal New Zealand College of GPs Medical Director Dr. Brian Betty has been hearing reports of eligible people not being aware of how to get a vaccine. He says there appear to be two main reasons.
Number one, there is variability in what different DHBs are doing in terms of the groups of patients in sequence 3 accessing the vaccine, so that leads to some inconsistency in terms of what's out there.
Vaccine supply is the second reason.
There's enough vaccine coming into the country, but a lot of it is coming in now in July, so the vaccine supply at the moment doesn't quite match the demand that is there for patients to get vaccine. And in some areas, patients are being restricted in their access to the vaccine just at this point until the vaccine becomes available in July.
The Ministry of Health says there's enough Pfizer vaccine for DHBs to stay on top of the more than 500,000 vaccinations over the next 5 weeks. While stocks will be tight, the ministry says they've planned carefully to manage their way through. The ministry has asked DHBs to ensure people in Group 3 receive an invitation to be vaccinated by the end of July at the latest. Vaccinations for anyone aged 16 or over is expected to start from the end of July.
And a ton of feedback on this one. Let's start with the people happy with their service. Alison says, I'm 71 years old with a lung condition. The Southern DHB have just opened bookings in our area. We booked via the online system and it worked a treat. Great service, says Alison. Another person, 85-year-old with no health problems, had their vaccine today in Rangiora, as did others throughout the week. The system seems to be working. Bill says, I'm 70, living in Dunedin. High praise for our rollout here. Very smooth process, friendly, informative staff. Interesting. All three of those come from the South Island, which are the ones that are, I think, batting above their weight, going faster than the rest of them, and who are being told to kind of, apparently put the handbrake on. So let's see what happens after that. Others here, Jenny says, will all Group 3 be vaccinated before Group 4 is started? Because in Canterbury you can't book. No over 65s that I know have been invited yet. Another listener says, my son with cystic fibrosis and my very elderly parents have had no call up for a vaccine yet. Angie and Nelson says, I'm 70 and got a notification to book my vaccination. I spoke to them today and the earliest I can get a jab is 16 August, says Angie. Ash says, I had my first vaccination but have been unable to get through to book the second by phone or even get an answer from the repeated emails. What happens if you don't get the follow-up shot, says Ash. Keep your feedback coming. There's lots of it here. Hopefully we'll get to a little more before we need to head off. A mongrel mob Waikato leader claims 3 members charged with serious drug offences are outliers in the chapter. The trio were arrested on Monday along with 35 others following 37 police raids as part of an FBI-led operation. Operation Trojan's Shield has netted hundreds of alleged criminals across the globe after they were caught using a messaging app secretly created and monitored by law enforcement. Paula Ormsby is a member of Waikato-based mongrel mob Kingdom and leads its first women's chapter. Police say 3 Waikato mob members are implicated in Operation Trojan Shield, despite the chapter insisting it's not involved in drug dealing. Our reporter Nick Trubridge asked Paula Ormsby how she explains that contradiction.
As conflicting as that may sound, Waikato Kingdom, or mongrel mob Waikato, we have got an absolute no tolerance around methamphetamine, around drugs. And so what you've got is you've got 3 members that have been caught up in this. Those 3 members have acted as individuals. They aren't and haven't followed the leadership, which is no tolerance to drugs. And unfortunately, we can't micromanage what every member does. It's very much like the police. The police have had multiples of their own officers charged on from rape to drug dealing to manufacturing, and yet that still happens within their organisation.
Is there an issue at play here whereby there are offshoots within the chapter who are, again, allegedly involved in this sort of activity without the knowledge of leadership, without the knowledge of people like yourself, of people like Sonny?
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what it is. And I mean, we have done for years now. We do all kinds of courses of delivering to the members around the harm of methamphetamine. Everybody knows our stance against it. We've got our own internal processes for dealing with anybody that may have addiction problems. And so, yeah, our stance has always been very clear around this.
How do you sort that out, though? Because, you know, Paula, I mean, some members of the public might say, well, you've lost control there. So how do you sort of get on top of this?
Yeah, and I guess it's like the police, you know, with the police, how they get on top of it is actually the garden gets wet, and we see that in the same process. As much as this has occurred, well, you know, how else would we have known this? You know, unless it's been brought to our attention. And, you know, funnily enough, you know, the police have weeded the garden for us.
When did you find out about the charges? Did you have any idea that they were coming?
No. I mean, we had absolutely no idea whatsoever until a number of raids happened, which I think was on the Monday.
We know there are people out there, whether they be politicians or members of the public, who simply don't buy the messaging. What do you say to those people? What would you say to those people?
You know, to be really honest, I couldn't care less what anybody else thinks, because we are making changes within the mongrel mob. There has been a shift in paradigm, and there's always going to be sceptics out there, but we know the difference. You just have to look at the statistics around the amount of our members that are incarcerated compared to, you know, mongrel mob as a whole are very low. Our suicide rates are low. Our family violence is low. And that is because we have done so much work around addiction, around healing, around decolonising mindsets, that we've been working on this pro-social and productive, constructive approach.
That was Mongrel Mob Waikato's Paula Ormsby talking to Nick Trubridge there. It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Wellington Zoo's closed its kiwi house indefinitely while it investigates what's killed 3 of the precious birds in its care in the past few months. Tahi, a one-legged kiwi that had been with the zoo for 15 years, died a fortnight ago after suffering similar symptoms to 2 other birds who died earlier. Zoo Chief Executive Karen Fifield says they're still trying to work out what went wrong.
Tahi, as you probably are aware, has been at the zoo for more than 15 years, and the last couple of months he started to get quite unwell, wouldn't eat his food, and sort of just went downhill. So he'd been having veterinary care during that time, and he just went downhill continually. He'd have a bit of a perk up and then he'd be down again. And so there was a whole lot of work that the vets did in terms of testing and x-rays and a whole range of things trying to work out what was wrong. The only thing they could find was that he had ulcers in his intestinal tract that could be related to worms, but it's not clearly evident yet. So there's still a lot more pathology work to be undertaken and a lot more investigation still to be had with specialist pathologists and other avian specialists and kiwi experts as well.
Because recently you've had 2 other kiwi die, haven't you? What can you tell us about that?
So very similar symptoms, some small differences, but still with these ulcers in their intestinal tract, which is what we're trying to look for. We're trying to find, are there links to any of these medical conditions that we were finding with the kiwi?
So Karen, do you think at this stage, are the symptoms so similar that is your hypothesis that all these kiwi had the same issue?
That's where we started, but we can't definitively say that because pathology might show different things. But there is a hypothesis around that, but it's still yet to be proved.
So where does that leave you then? Is it safe to have other kiwi at the zoo?
At the moment, we're not going to get kiwi. Our kiwi come from the breeding program in New Zealand, and so those kiwi are bred specifically for the zoos who have kiwi in human care. So we want to do a lot more investigation around these 3 kiwi before we get any new kiwi into the house. So we will be closing our kiwi house until we can be absolutely sure that we have uncovered as much as we can about what happened.
So ulcers, does that suggest there could be anything wrong with the environment?
We don't think so at this point. But again, as I said, we still have to look at every single possibility. We have to, look under every stone to try and find out what this is. So that's why, and even we will probably, even if it's not linked to their environment, we are going to refurbish that environment anyway. We're going to do it just as a matter of caution.
So what does that mean for, the preservation program of Kiwi?
Mm-hmm. Well, our birds are very much part of an advocacy program for Kiwi, and being part of the capital zoo, capital city zoo, they're very important for our visitors to be able to see Kiwi, because many New Zealanders have never seen a Kiwi. So it's a really important program that we work with a whole range of partners across the country. But I think that some of the work that we can find out through our conservation medicine work with these 3 Kiwi might actually add to the body of knowledge around preservation of wild Kiwi and also Kiwi in human care. So I think the more we can investigate and the more we can really look deeply into these deaths, we might be able to end up with adding more to the body of knowledge. That's my hope.
Because weren't 2 of them due to be released? Not Tahi, but the other 2?
Yeah, the other 2. So basically what happens with the animals that are bred for nocturnal houses in New Zealand, they stay in the nocturnal houses for 4 years and then they're released. So yes, we were almost getting ready to release those other 2, but when they started to get sick. So Tahi was a different character because he only had 1 leg and he was never going to be released, which is why he was with us for so long. So he's quite unique in that approach. This is why it's really important for us to understand and to involve all the stakeholders with Kiwi about what we can actually understand about this situation.
It must be pretty worrying.
Right. Oh, it is concerning. For me, it's like, well, for all of us actually at the zoo, we really need to understand this. Our vets are, just really looking into as much information as they can find. And as I said, working with other stakeholders like Massey University, with Department of Conservation, really trying to understand what's gone on with these 3 birds. Yeah.
Karen, when you've finished your investigation, what actually happens with the kiwi feathers?
The kiwi feathers, we have given kiwi feathers back to iwi in the past, and we have done that. I'm not sure what will happen with these feathers, because the birds go to Massey for their pathology. So it depends what happens with the postmortems and things like that.
That is Karen Fifield from Wellington Zoo. The motivation is threefold for New Zealand mixed martial arts world champion Israel Adesanya heading into his latest title defence this weekend. Adesanya defends his middleweight belt against Italian Marvin Vettori at UFC 263 in Arizona. The Kiwi comes into the bout fresh from his first loss in professional MMA, unsuccessfully moving up a division in an attempt to claim a second world title in March. As Clay Wilson reports, that defeat isn't the only reason for the added edge to Adesanya's preparation for Sunday's fight.
For the winner by split decision, Israel Adesanya!
Just one of Israel Adesanya's 9 UFC victories has come via split decision. Since that 2018 win over Marvin Vettori, the New Zealander has claimed the middleweight title and twice defended it. Vettori has rattled off 5 straight wins to set up a rematch in the same Arizona arena. Not that Adesanya feels he deserves it.
You can look at both sides since we last fought. Honestly speaking, since we last fought, you can look at the stack of people he's fought and the stack of people I've fought. There's a vast difference.
Unsurprisingly, his opponent disagrees. Vettori is confident this is his moment to become the UFC's first Italian champion, even if he's not the fan favourite.
I have the advantage because I'm the superior fighter. I can do everything. He doesn't have all the answer of what I bring to the table.
And it's no secret what Vettori will serve up. The number 3 ranked challenger is expected to come forward and attempt to get the fight to the ground, playing to his strengths and avoiding the New Zealanders' world-class kickboxing. Adesanya admits Vettori has improved, but tells ESPN it won't be enough.
He might have adapted a little better, but guess what? So have I. I've adapted a lot better. So yeah, I always want to school him 5-0 each round, bell to bell. So yeah, when it's all said and done, he can look at me and know that I'm the better fighter.
it's an attitude, in part, fuelled by Vittori's continuous claims of victory in that first fight. But as far as Adesonya's head coach is concerned, the claims are more than phony. City Kickboxing's Eugene Behrman says the Italian is plain wrong.
There's only two people on this planet that think that Marvin won that fight, and that's it, one judge and Marvin. As far as I can get most people's opinion, that opinion of Marvin is slightly diluted.
Either way, it's fuelling an already motivated Adesonya. Behrman says both the middleweight champion and another CKB fighter in action on Sunday, Brad Riddell, are channeling their emotions after the death of teammate Fau Vake last month following a violent attack in central Auckland.
We've chosen to use it in a positive manner to help motivate us and energise us during trainings. Obviously, the thing is just balancing out that motivation and expectation with not putting too much pressure on themselves to obviously honour Fau by getting the win. I'm just trying to keep that in balance, and I think the boys are in a good place.
A rare loss, coming in a challenge for the light heavyweight belt in March, has also honed Adesonya's focus. Add in the return of fans after 2 fights in largely empty arenas, and confidence couldn't be higher.
Almost 3 years ago to the month, I remember the feeling, the magic that was in the air when I took this guy away. This time, I'm going to use that energy from you guys again. It's kind of exciting to see you guys out here. Let's go!
Israel Adesonya is promising nothing less than a repeat result over Vittori and a return to the winner's circle.
Before we head off, some more of your feedback about the issue of the vaccination rollout and how it's going. The government's expecting some big deliveries from Pfizer next month. But a lot of people are asking questions about when they're going to get their jab. They're in priority groups that should have started, but they don't seem to have. This person, though, says, move to Waiheke. Anyone and everyone can roll up and get vaccinated at the local GP clinic. I feel rather guilty. It's been so easy for me. 69, they say, compared with others so much older and more deserving. And this one's interesting too. 3 people in my office have been vaccinated this week, the listener says, all in good health and in Auckland, 2 in their 30s and 1 in their 50s. The 33-year-old I spoke to had no idea why it was offered to him, but wasn't going to say no. Another person says no word of vaccine here in Christchurch for any acquaintances, including over 90s and people with chronic respiratory problems. Maisie's got in touch. Maisie's 70 and says, I'm willing to put myself at the end of the line for the COVID vax. Give it to workers and parents of children first, those whose lives are still in front of them, not those selfish ones who are at the end of their life, says Maisie. Another person reckons all Westland Regional Council staff have had their vaccination and reckons that's odd. Another person in the Capital and Coast DHB catchment says, I'm over 70 and I'm on immune suppression medication following a kidney transplant. Yet to hear anything from the DHB, Capital and Coast. And lastly, this one, I'm in Group 3 with a chronic lung condition, but local medical centre and GP have no idea when I can get the COVID vaccination, nor have I been contacted. Thanks for all your feedback. We're back on Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Director-General of Health says COVID-19 vaccinations will be carefully managed over the next 5 weeks, but insists the program is ahead of schedule and supplies of the vaccine are not about to run out. The producers of a film about the Christchurch terror attacks say they consulted the local Muslim community, but the Muslim Association of Canterbury says it knew nothing of the proposed movie until today. Marchers at a hikoi of Far North Māori opposed to changes to land use rules say the government needs to listen and work with land